What you call that noise?
The XTC Podcast.
XTClimelight.com.
What do you call that noise?
What do you call that noise?
The Wars of Love.
That was the voice of Darryl Bullock, who very sadly died at the age of 60 on the 23rd of December 2024. Darryl was a massive fan of XTC, an avid record collector, and one of the tireless organisers of the online and in-person XTC fan conventions. He was such a pillar of the fan community that this episode of What Do You Call That Noise, the XTC podcast, is dedicated to him, with thoughts especially for his husband, Niall Milligan. My name is Mark Fisher, and in this episode we're going to hear memories of Darryl from some of the many people who knew and loved him, especially those who loved to hear him laugh. We'll also hear Darryl in action in a previously unreleased interview he did with the artist Ken White at the XTC fan convention in Swindon in 2022. Ken, as many people will know, painted several murals around Swindon, including the much-missed Swindon Celebrities mural that featured Andy, Colin, Terry, Dave and Barry. And he also created the backdrop for the cover of XTC's Black Sea. As you'll hear, Darryl was a brilliantly well-informed and engaged interviewer. I've been corresponding with Darryl since the days of Limelight, my 1980s XTC fanzine, when he worked for Badlands Records in Cheltenham and was already cultivating his love of collecting. I'm guessing we met in person for the first time in the 1989 fan convention in Manchester. About 10 years after that, he left the record shop to study journalism in Bristol and began writing about food, drink and music. Here's how Darryl described himself.
I'm a writer, author, I suppose. Written a few books that have done kind of okay-ish. Huge XTC fan. I kind of really got into them around the time of Black Sea English Settlements.
He was the editor of Venue magazine's LGBTQI section, and as a lover of terrible records, he founded the World's Worst Records blog, which in 2018 became an online radio show. He also took over the publication of The Spark, an ethically minded quarterly magazine about the West Country. In 2014, an article he had written about Florence Foster Jenkins led to the offer of writing a full-length biography about the world's worst opera singer. That, in turn, led to a formidable series of books over the last decade, including David Bowie Made Me Gay, 100 Years of LGBT Music, and The Velvet Mafia, The Gay Men Who Ran the Swinging 60s, both of which included interviews with Andy Partridge, who became a firm friend. Andy called Darryl a veritable bard of the bent, broken and baroque. He was also the author of The World's Worst Records, Volumes 1 and 2, the infamous Cherry Sisters, The Worst Act in Vaudeville, and Pride, Pop and Politics, Music, Theatre and LGBT Activism between the years 1970 and 2021. His final book, Love and Fury, The Life and Death and Legacy of Joe Meek, about the British record producer, will be published posthumously in March. On a personal level, I'm very grateful to Darryl for hosting the LGBTQI plus episode of this podcast, as well as being a guest on an edition about collecting. Here's one of the lovely things he said.
I remember Ringo Starr once saying something along the lines of the thing he was proudest of with the Beatles is all the songs are about peace and love. All the songs are about love. And that's kind of similar with XTC. The vast majority of their songs are about love, but it's not necessarily very obviously, boy-girl love, heterosexual love. It's about a love for mankind. It's about a love for nature. It's about a love for spirit. It's about love for the planet and what's going on, and not excluding people from that, which is, I think, when you're growing up and you're looking for your own tribe and your own music to listen to, that's a really attractive thing.
Before we hear your tributes, let's have this month's XTC Influence song. This time it's the turn of Dan Barrow, who is preparing to perform a one-man version of the Big Express at the forthcoming 2025 XTC Fan Festival in Swindon. The Big Express, of course, was Darryl's favourite XTC album. Dan tells me that he was unsure about whether he should embark upon this whole project or not, and he had a chat with Darryl, who told him to go for it and gave him loads of encouragement. Darryl said that Train Running Low was his favourite song, and he couldn't wait to join in with the woo-hoos. That, says Dan, was enough to make him want to do it. Here is Dan speaking before Darryl died to introduce I Hate Your Kids.
What do you call that noise?
Mark, hello. This is Dan Barrow, formerly of XTC tribute band Ecstatic from the early 2000s. And more recently, I tackled Mama solo at the 2022 convention in Swindon. Now, currently, I'm scratching my head trying to work out how I'm going to do the Big Express solo at the 2025 Fan Festival, and that's a story for another podcast, I think. As well as paying tribute to my heroes, I also like to write my own music under the label of The Florida Recounts, which is a name that some of you will probably get. In 2021, I decided to bite the bullet and try and get these songs down properly, so I wrote and recorded and mixed and tried to master my own album, which is called Up an Atom. I was lucky enough to have a small record deal with a independent label called Nub Records, so Up an Atom is available on Spotify and Apple Music and some of the other streaming services, I think. I think if you were to take any song off that album, you're probably going to hear a bit of XTC in the influence there, because they've been a huge influence on me. But the song I've chosen for you goes like this. I was in holiday in Croatia a few years ago, and we were in a villa with a shared pool. Halfway through the holiday, a family turned up with some kids, and they made everyone's life a misery. They were loud and brattish and splashing and just not very relaxing. So I retired from the poolside and I went upstairs, had my guitar with me, and I wrote this song, I Hate Your Kids. Thanks very much for the podcast, Mark, and for playing my track. I hope you enjoy it, and looking forward to seeing people at the 2025 Fan Convention, where I will try and entertain you with The Big Expression, The Big Express live. Thanks very much.
We've been friends for so many years. We've laughed and cried over many beers, plotted world domination and other stupid conversations. That was then, this is later, and I have watched you get tamer. But the point of this really is something altogether more serious. Dude, I've got some news. I hate your kids. Jealous, but I think I know what hell is. Spoiled brats with spiky hair, always screaming how it's not fair. They make demands on the catalogue. You're better off with a cat or dog. I'm not bitter, but oh my god, I saw your elder steal my iPad, dude. I don't mean to be rude, but I hate your kids. Take them away. Your
Thanks very much, Dan. I'll include links to Dan's music in the podcast blurb, and we'll be hearing more from Dan about his plans for the Big Express before the XTC Fan Festival. If you have an XTC-inspired song, feel free to let me know at mark@xtclimelight.com. Although there is a long waiting list ahead of you, I'm afraid. If you've been enjoying What Do You Call That Noise, the XTC podcast, well, remember, I wouldn't be able to do it without the support of the lovely, lovely, lovely XTC fans on Patreon. Many, many thanks to all of you who have contributed. If you'd like to do the same, and of course you would, all you have to do is go to patreon.com/Mark Fisher and decide on your level of support. There are 3 levels, and if you opt to be a knight in shining karma, I'll read out your name at the end of each episode. A reminder, you can buy your copy of What Do You Call That Noise, an XTC Discovery book at xtclimelight.com, where you'll also find details of all the podcasts. Now, before we hear the interview with Ken White, let's hear some of your memories of Darryl. I was in touch with many people who spoke fondly of Darryl, all of them citing his humour, friendliness and enthusiasm. People such as Belinda Blanchard, who met him at a bookshop in East London for the launch of Queer Blues, and said that Darryl was so pleased to see her, he made her feel like he was there to meet her and not the other way around. And Terry Arnett, who called him one of the nicest people within the community, one who had an insane amount of knowledge about XTC and about other topics, and also someone who supported his XTC cover band Fossil Fools when they were playing live. Thanks for all your thoughts. Here are some more.
What do you call that noise?
Hello, it's Ursula from Northumberland here. I knew Darryl from the XTC conventions, but first heard his name mentioned on an old YouTube clip featuring XTC in the Attic from about 1989. It was a question and answer session, and even back then, Darryl was a well-known figure in the XTC world. More recently, he had his own question and answer session for the latest convention that was held in Swindon, and was wanting questions provided. I cheekily asked him what the chances were of getting Andy Partridge to do his own meet and greet with his fans and listeners, to which Darryl told me in no uncertain terms that wouldn't be happening. So that was me told. Anyway, he was kind enough to ask Andy another question of mine, which I was grateful for. So that's how I remember Darryl, firm but fair and always ready to help. So, if you're sitting up there on your white cloud now, Darryl, have a drink from me, and I hope you're still spinning a few XTC discs. Bye for now.
My name's Tom Demi. I first met Darryl really through Facebook in the run-up to the 2017 convention, as he was promoting his new David Bowie Made Me Gay book, which got my attention as a gay man myself, and someone's pretty interested in the history and the movement and everything. And I could see this was just a different way of looking at music history and gay history and everything. But it wasn't available to buy in the US before the convention. So we spoke in person in the back room of the pub where they had the main festivities and everything. I remember just having a pretty long animated conversation with him. As everybody knows, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of music, and it's more than happy to talk for as long as you are willing. And I was willing. So I guess it was the next day that he brought the book, and I paid him for it right there. So he signed it for me, which was really nice. You can see, Mark, in your one book, there's that photo with the Fossil Fools and everybody behind them, and Darryl and I are both in that. We're not together, but we're both in the background in there. Since then, it's just been discovering his books as they've come out. I really burned right through David Bowie Made Me Gay because it was so fresh. He has a lively way of writing where he just make it come alive and just dig out these characters that you never heard of in music and in the early days, and had so many contemporary interviews, including Andy Partridge, and just wove a really great tale. And then that continued with the Velvet Mafia, which I found personally the most fascinating, because I never really thought about how much of the superstars of the 60s were basically guided by gay men, and again, just a very rich story and great photographs sprinkled throughout. And then Pride, Pop and Politics, UK-based history of LGBT issues, touching on music, but really just some shocking behavior that the police endorsed centuries beforehand and everything, and just how things really kind of changed in the 60s and 70s and beyond. And then, Queer Blues, which I'm reading now, finally tells yet another story of blues artists, going back to Ma Rainey and Bessie Smith. It's just a very engaging story. And again, as with all the books, I mean, all the interviews are great, and the way he tries to pull together these disparate threads and conflicting stories, and like, okay, well, this had to be true because this is not true, and so on. I would always kind of write reviews of his books on my page, and he would share them. I know he appreciated that. I know he had like loads of ideas, and then the new book apparently was already written because it's available for pre-order, and it's coming out in June. So the one about Joe Meek, it's just a shame of the things that we'll never see from him. He was in the hospital a few years ago for a heart-related issue, and I was just wishing him well. And he said he was just wanting to get out. He says, I'm a very impatient patient. His sense of humor was just always infectious, and just loved seeing like his interviews with Andy and just the love of his husband Neil and dogs he had, and friends at the pub and all that. His sister and too. And so my heart really goes out to everybody involved.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah, singer from Fascine, here with Laurie, pianist, and we are both. Would love to say a couple of words about Darryl, because he was just a beacon of light in the community, the XTC community. Such a wonderful ball of fire and laughter, and just, we're going to miss him a lot. But we got some really good memories with him. So as much as it is still a shock, I still try and remember the absolute hilarity of him. And just every time I met him or just said something online, I would either laugh with him or at him, because he was just absolutely brilliant. I have to keep remembering that, because, like I said, it's super, super sad, but he was just, absolute fire. And I mean, as a person, interested in other people, music, culture, telling stories, and obviously super talented, hardworking, inspiring and all that. But I just want to remember him for his energy. Super infectious, optimistic, funny, and going to really, really miss him. What a legend.
Yeah, I remember us doing we did a little interview with Darryl about the wedding present, and it sort of rapidly veered off from any formal questioning just to laughing for the whole thing. Yeah, it was it was madness, and that's how I remember Darryl, is that most of the time we were just laughing, not at anything or anyone, but we were just laughing all of the time. We felt like we needed to do a sort of very modest little post about him, and we were going to put up a little thumbnail or whatever, and literally the first image of the interview we did with him was Darryl head back in the chair, just belly laughing, right? And then I scrolled through the video, and I sort of had to stop myself after a while because it got quite sad. But I would stop every sort of 10 seconds. He didn't stop laughing. He actually did not stop laughing for the whole thing. Yeah, I mean, God almighty, the world needs a bit more of that, I'd say. Darryl and I found we had an affinity to a very niche band, whatever. And he rocked up in a Bizarro t-shirt, which is kind of a really sweet touch. It's just like, he didn't have to do that. But I thought, what a legend that guy was, just to do that little kind of thing, to go, this is important. It wasn't, but it was, right? And I thought he put in that little effort.
Yeah.
And he was a maniac, and that's how I remember him. He was, like you say, he was a ball of energy, a ball of fire, and his laugh will be missed, I think.
Yeah. Super dirty laugh. I mean, the point, we're all so shocked because, 60, so young. But at the same time, I just thought he lived his life so well. He was so driven into creating things, talking to people, getting things going. And we've got to try and hold on to that, because, as much as he is going to be massively missed, we need to keep some of his energy alive.
Yeah. As a human, he was just really so positive and up. And every time we spoke to him or messaged him or met up or whatever, there was a elfish joy that we would be laughing like kids. he was always really engaging. You could rock up, have a pint with him. You could rock up, do an interview with him, and there was never an agenda. There was no pre-thought, post-thought. He was always in the moment, and that's what I loved about Darryl, is that I never felt you had to entertain him. He was the entertainment.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I'm laughing now just thinking about laughing with him.
Yeah. I particularly love the daily selfies, which was basically the same picture, different pie, different location, but an explanation as to where it was. Everybody tuned in for it. Was like the daily Darryl pic.
Yeah. And he always looked amazing. Whatever he was doing, he
did. He was dapper, super dapper.
Dapper, well turned out, and he had a brilliant self-awareness, and he could laugh at himself and other people. And it's I don't know if it's fully sunk in. I don't know if I'm sad for the loss or happy for knowing him. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so true. When we're at the XTC convention, we're at the hotel after. I can't actually remember the direct question, but his answer was that he had a 5-year plan to create as many books and work as he could, essentially so he could then go off and retire, which there's the sadness in it. You know, he's done all this work and hasn't seen the sort of sunset in that sense. But what I really love is he had such a will to seek out new things and constantly create these worlds through his books and through his work and these communities. And I really hope that stays with some of us to whatever it is you want to do. If you want to write a book, if you want to write a song, if you want to try something, he's a great example as to whatever age you are. You know, he must have been 55 when he decided to do that and commit to it. And I think it's a really invaluable lesson that no age is too late to just have a go, whatever it is. So I remember him for that as well. And it's really lovely to have that memory in the hotel.
I've got his books on my shelf, and you can only say that too early, too soon. But also, like Sarah said, he crammed a lot into that.
A life lived really well. He has gone too young, but we've got to keep the optimism there.
Do you remember when you thrust the mic into his mouth when we were doing another satellite, and I think he'd lost his voice quite horrendously.
Yeah.
And there was no shyness or modesty with him. He went straight into the chorus. Yeah. And I remember playing the piano and looking at him just like dying with laughter.
It's just hilarious.
He brought the room with him, and everyone was a bit shy, but Darryl went straight in.
Yeah.
Like a fighter. And I was crying with laughter. It was so funny.
His actual line, Lawrence, was, I said to him something like, Darryl, I want to get involved with you tonight. And in jest. And he said, I'm the walrus of love. Like the Barry White walrus of love.
Okay, this first one, it's a new song. We've got a new album. And, Barry White. Oh, yeah. Tonight I want to get involved with you, Darryl. Be right, yes.
The wars of love.
The walrus.
He's
the
very
walrus
sexy.
He was the walrus, isn't he, Barry White? Are we ready?
I think we're ready.
God, that was
Let me know if
sexy.
you can't hear it.
I think we're all aroused, aren't we? Okay, off we go.
I try and remember his humour and fire.
He was that guy in the room, though, that if you didn't know anyone, you'd go to him.
Yeah,
he would be the guy that you go and talk to, and he'd be the guy that there would be long periods before I certainly saw him again, and he greeted me like a long lost family member, which was always very lovely, and always gave us. The hugs were incredible, like to the point your head would pop off. I remember that as well.
Yeah. Oh, Darryl.
Oh, Darryl.
We love you, Darryl.
We love you so much.
This is Gaz Barrett from Swindon. I'd just like to take a few minutes to talk about Darryl. Our paths crossed for the very first time in 1989 at the XTC convention. Since then, our paths crossed many times. And in one instant, as I said, I lived in Swindon, and Darryl at the time lived in Bristol. And I had a hospital appointment to go to in Bristol. So I caught the train up to Bristol, and Darryl picked me up from the train station, took me to the hospital appointment, then we went for coffee, then he took me back to the train station. That is the type of person Darryl was, such caring, helpful, such a wonderful human being. And another instance, when Andy Partridge did his book signing in Bath, Darryl said I could tag along, which I did, but Darryl knew Bath and knew the pub that Andy would probably be in before the book signing. And so me, Darryl, went along to the pub, and sure enough, there was Andy. We then went to the book signing, and then we went back to the pub afterwards, and there was Andy, who got out his guitar. Another memory I have is Darryl. I think it was the first EXTC gig in Swindon in March 2020. Well, as we all know, the band would go off and then come back for an encore. I was standing next to Darryl, and as they were walking off before the encore, Darryl shouted up to the stage and said, "Can I have the set list, please?" And kindly they did give him the set list, walked off, and then come back and did the encore. It did make me smile. Such a wonderful person Darryl was. Whenever you visited Swindon, we would meet up for a meal or a drink. He was just an unbelievable human being. And we would always talk about XTC, and he helped me many times when I was looking for a certain vinyl, or we just talk about XTC. I'm still trying to come to terms with this news. Darryl was a wonderful human being and so helpful and caring. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Hi, this is Sandy Lefew. I'm currently snowed in central Ohio in the United States, as some of you might know. But since late last month, I have only been thinking about Darryl and my friends in England. I first became acquainted with Darryl through social media right after the XTC documentary came out, so probably 2017 or 2018. I was not familiar with his writing, but it became very evident immediately that this was somebody who prized inclusion and fairness and love. And almost everyone I've ever met associated with the XTC groups have been some of the best people I've come to meet. And it's people like Darryl who changed my life. I now have friends everywhere, but Darryl was special. The first time I met him was at the 2022 convention. He was the first person connected to the convention that I saw when I made it to Swindon. And he leapt up and recognized me and gave me a huge hug, and supportive and glad to see everyone. And it just felt like coming home after 2 years of the pandemic and trying to get this convention together. Losing Darryl is one of those losses that I not only mourn what was, but what could have been. He didn't find his voice through writing. He had a voice. He discovered the best way to use it. And I believe the stories and the recent books that he had published, these were his stories to tell. So we not only mourn what was, but what lay ahead for him. And 60 is far too young to lose somebody like that. I want to reach out to his husband and his family and all the loved ones he left behind. He's a presence that will truly be missed. When I opened my eyes at first light on Christmas morning on December 25th, the first thing that came to my mind was that was a dream. I had to convince myself that this had really happened and go back and look at the messages. And I'm sure we're all still so in shock, but I will miss him greatly. I worry about his pets, his little dog, Dottie, and the cats. She was a daddy's girl. And I think about her all the time. But I also think about him being reunited with Henry. on the other side. So love to everybody there. We're all thinking about the ones he's left behind. And I can't wait until I see you all again and we can have a proper hug and share all of our thoughts.
My name is Mike Smith, and I first met Darryl at the XTC convention in 2017 in Swindon, subsequently teaming up with Julie Matthews and Steve Manning to deliver 2 online events and a live convention in 2022. One of the key elements of all 3 events were interviews with members of the band and people associated with it in some way. For example, we enlisted original drummer Terry Chambers, Neville Farmer, author of Song Stories and co-conspirator behind the single Bags of Fun with Buster, White Music Go-To and Dukes producer John Leckie, Black Sea artist Ken White, and of course, Andy Partridge, amongst others. Once the interviews were arranged, it was over to Darryl to do the research and compile pertinent questions which flowed together in some kind of coherent format. And it was here that renowned author Darryl was in his element. Time and again, reviews of his books mention the depth and quality of research, with what is perhaps his breakthrough book, David Bowie Made Me Gay, being the most high profile. And it was this connection which prompted me to forward him a curious news snippet about Bowie, which mentioned a connection with Whitehaven, an area of the country Darryl and husband Neil had recently moved to. I sent the piece over to him for him to read purely as a matter of interest. The next thing I know, Darryl has applied his research skills and compiled an extensive article which subsequently appeared in a December issue of Cumbria Life. Darryl was always there for a beer and a laugh, yet at the end of the day was a consummate professional, eminently knowledgeable and endlessly curious, the perennial fan. Even now I'm thinking I'll just run this past Daz and see what he thinks.
Sweden calling. My name is Per Aronsson, and my first contact with Darryl was around 1991. I bought an XTC record from him. At that time, I chased anything rare out there with XTC. Darryl understood that I was a crazy fan, just as he was. Suddenly, he asked me if I wanted the demos from the next album. I could not believe what I heard. Of course I wanted them. Mind you, at this time, it was more than 2 years ago that Orange and Lemons was released. So I was starving for anything from our boys in Swindon. I still have that cassette. I played it over and over again. Anyway, shortly after None Such was released, Darryl said that he had a copy for sale of the CD single Wrapped in Grey that had been withdrawn by Virgin. A very rare item, and I have it thanks to Darryl. When Darryl published his book, David Bowie Made Me Gay, he wanted that Andy Partridge should get a copy. So with the help of Andy's friend and musical collaborator, Stu Rowe, I arranged that Andy got the book. A while later, that led to that Darryl and Andy met and became friends. I shall not brag, but I'm glad I could be of some help. Since I live almost at the North Pole, have Darryl and me mostly chatted via the net. But we did meet in person during the XTC convention in Swindon 2017. And he was just as I expected, very much into XTC and all around a very happy and lovely chap. So sad that he's gone and way too early. I don't think there is a heaven, but if there is, I know Darryl's train is running high on XTC Soul Coal. So long, my friend.
My name's Ian Hayward, and Darryl and I were brought together by Buster Gonad. I'm very tempted to leave it there, but I probably should explain. I'm not an XTC completist by any means, but I did used to subscribe to Viz Comic, so when I found out that somewhere out there was a 7-inch record that brought the two together, it went straight onto my must-have list. Step forward Darryl Bullock, who, being Darryl, had a dozen or so copies, some of which he wanted to offload. At that stage, we'd never met, but we had a chat in Facebook Messenger, the deal was done, and Darryl made me the happy owner of Bags of Fun with Buster by Johnny Japes and his Gesticles. That was the first of many chats I had with Darryl. I've been looking back through the online ones today and laughing out loud at some of his comments. What a witty, sometimes waspish, but always kind and super smart man he was. We met a number of times at XTC-related events and gigs, and most memorably at the 2022 convention, where he was part of that small and absolutely heroic team who defied great odds to deliver a wonderful event. One of my favourite memories of that convention was during Facine's terrific gig, when Sarah coerced everyone in the front row to sing a solo, fa 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 ta ta ta, don't need another satellite, into the microphone. I say coerced, but really we were all just putty in her hands. Darryl was standing next to me, and on listening back to the recording, I sound like a choir boy, while big-voiced Darryl's about 6 octaves below me. Darryl was an XTC devotee to the bone, of which there's no better illustration than his championing of the Big Express, an album that isn't many people's favourite and almost certainly wouldn't be the first choice of an armchair XTC enthusiast. He probably had enough round-sleeved vinyl copies of it to provide all the wheels for a large-scale model of the North Star. Note to self, might try that. We also shared a love of the Divine Comedy, and it was at Darryl's insistence that I splashed out 125 quid on the box set of all their albums. Worth every penny, it turned out. I never quite heard, though, what it was that he heard in his other favourite band, the Pixies. This week I've been re-listening to him reading the audio version of his book, David Bowie Made Me Gay. It's an eye-opening and very entertaining book, which I can highly recommend, and it's been very nice to hear his voice again, reading in that conversational style of his, in that avuncular West Country voice. Very nice, but of course terribly sad too. Talking of his books though, what a legacy. As an author, he seemed to be permanently on a roll for a good few years. So many books, some of them published internationally in foreign language editions, and award winners too. I was planning to bring my rather large pile of his books along to this year's XTC Fan Festival for him to sign them. I'm deeply saddened to think that that won't happen, and we won't be chatting over a pint in the Tuppenny ever again. But I will be raising a glass in his memory, and I know that many, many others will too. Rest in pride, Darryl, mate, you lovely, remarkable man.
Hello, this is Steve Tilling. Back in 2018, I played in TC&I, which is a band of Colin Moulding, and more recently in EXTC with Terry Chambers, and I'm currently in my own band, Circa 5. I first met Darryl after one of the TC&I concerts at the Arts Centre in Swindon. He cut quite an imposing figure, really, but the moment you spoke to him, you just knew you were in the company of a kind and gentle soul. He just had a way about him that made you feel at ease. Then after the run of TC&I gigs, he very kindly interviewed me at the Tuppenny, which is one of the pubs opposite the Arts Centre. Before we met for the interview, I'd given Darryl a copy of one of my Circa 5 CDs, which is, I suppose, a little bit in the progressive rock vein. And I subsequently found out that he really didn't like prog rock very much. So I'm, to this day, very grateful that he didn't express his disdain and disgust at the album. But that was Darryl. He was such a lovely man, always ready with a kind word and words of support. I considered him a friend. He loved XTC, and the world of XTC loved him back. And I'll never forget him. Goodbye, Darryl.
Hello, my name's Hugh Thomas, and I first got to know Darryl 9 years ago in, I think, the Chalk Hills Facebook group. I was studying at university in Bath, and he was, of course, Bristolian. We shared a favourite XTC album in The Big Express. I think we both flattered ourselves in thinking, yes, we get it, the others don't understand. And anytime anybody dissed The Big Express, we'd both be going at them with pitchforks, you know? It sounds a cliche, but he really took me under his wing. I was interested in writing about music, and he was a brilliant and highly original writer. He was so encouraging and so frank, which is really great for me. I was giddy about XTC, and he'd been passionate about them for over 30 years, and he'd lost none of that passion. He was very generous with his time and his knowledge, and more than that, he was a complete hoot to be around. I'm sure a lot of people will be saying that. The first time I met him in person was a pretty special day. Andy Partridge did an event at Toppings in Bath to promote the great book with Todd Bernhardt, Complicated Game. And Darryl, myself, and others ended up hanging out with Andy in a nearby pub after the event. I was jittering with excitement about meeting a great man, and I remember Darryl telling me beforehand, well, he doesn't like arse lickers. Sorry, Darryl, I think I did a lot of arse licking that night. We had some really great times. We saw a few gigs together, the Goon Sax, Fossil Fools, EXTC. One great memory is when we saw TC and I on the first night of their shows at Swindon Arts Centre. Now, Darryl had always told me there was one particular XTC song that he really disliked. I'm not going to say what it is. It's a sensitive subject. I thought it was a lovely track, but Darryl was hilarious in his vitriol for this song. Anyway, that night, TC and I played that song, and Darryl was visibly moved by it. He came out of that gig saying it had changed the song for him. I thought that was lovely. There was so much to Darryl. He was more than just someone in the XTC world, of course, but he was a really invaluable friend. I've sometimes found navigating fandom a little bit difficult, but knowing Darryl was knowing just how great being part of one can be. Thanks very much, Mark, for asking me if I'd like to contribute. Just a few silly things, but it's a really terrible thing to be talking about Darryl like this. And I'm thinking of his husband, Niall, and his family and his friends, and just everyone who loved him. And that's a lot of people.
Hello, this is Keely Moss, leader of the band Keely, and a big fan of the band XTC. Darryl's loss is immense. To the XTC fan community, the LGBT community, and to all who knew him. I first came across Darryl as the cat I saw on YouTube conducting so many riveting interviews with members of XTC and key figures within the XTC world. So imagine my surprise and delight to be contacted out of the blue one day in 2023 by Darryl, who I had no idea would have even heard of me, with an invitation from him to take part in a special XTC podcast. From the moment we were first in touch with one another, Darryl was warmth and openness personified. A truly lovely man who made such a positive impression on everyone he came into contact with and who will be sorely missed. Our trains are all running low on soul coal as a result of his passing. The last balloon is leaving.
We're Julie Matthews and Margaret Brown. We're mother and daughter, and we've known Darryl for over 8 years, but mainly as part of the XTC fan community, at first online, and then we actually met Darryl in person for the first time in June 2016 at a pub in Bath, just after Andy Partridge had been signing copies of Complicated Game. It was thanks to Darryl, wasn't it, that we knew where to be, so where Andy was likely to be going after the event, and we're lucky enough to be there when Andy was chatting with a few of us.
And somebody thankfully handed him a guitar.
Yes, I still don't know who that was, but well done that person, whoever that was.
And it was thanks to you that I know Darryl.
Through me initially, but then you knew him in your own right from then on, really. And he was very kind enough to message me the day after and say what a lovely young lady you were, and how much you knew about music. And he was quite heartened by the next generation loving the music of XTC. So we knew him from then on, didn't we? Especially in organising the next 2 in-person XTC conventions and then the online ones, which we had a little hand in.
But she's being humble.
Not really. But Darryl did have an enormous part in organising the online and the 2022 conventions. Like as you said before, the almost ill-fated convention where we lost our venue while people were flying in internationally.
Yeah.
But Darryl was great in a crisis, wasn't he?
He was very diplomatic. You always say that he was the Paul McCartney of the organisers.
Yeah, definitely. When there were obviously a few bumps in the road in organising the 2022 in-person convention, we lost our venue. That was one thing. Of course, Mike Smith pulled out a load of stops to help us with that as well.
Swindon Town Council, we've never forgiven you.
No. Whenever there were issues with the organisation, including dates had to be moved and things inevitably go wrong, there were controversies and what have you. And Darryl would always, even though he had strong opinions about things, but he was always very good and very diplomatic about smoothing things over with people and sorting them out, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
There was one particular issue that we had, and I dug out the comment that Darryl made online about this when we were talking about it amongst ourselves as organisers, and it was about responding to a particular situation, and we came to a decision about what to do. And he said, well, I think that's perfect. It's clean, to the point, and surprisingly free of rage. Which, was a very Darryl comment, and actually, in a nutshell, captured what we needed to do.
And I think my favourite memory of Darryl was seeing you, Darryl, and Mike Smith in the foyer of the Jury's Inn after what could have been an absolute disaster of an XTC convention, and you all just sort of having a pint and taking a sigh of relief, and him throwing his head back laughing as he always was wont to do, and people coming into the Jury's Inn and checking in and going, Darryl's here, and just recognising him by his laughter.
I could hear he was
and
there.
Coming over to us and being like,
went to find him. Yeah. So he drew people to him, didn't he? Yeah. Well, during the organising of the convention, lots of things, it became apparent over the years that I knew him as well, that we had lots of things in common, that we'd been born 6 months apart, but nowhere near each other geographically.
Well, we won't say who's older.
We were in the same school year, and so we had a lot of the same experiences culturally growing up, the same things on television, with lots of similar likes and dislikes. You know, we both loved the Beatles and XTC and
hated Coldplay.
Yeah, like Russell Sprouts didn't like the Tories and Coldplay. Lots of things, little things like that. And I happened to mention to him one day, and I think it's when I was giving him a lift, and we got to talking about TV programmes. We'd both been watching Rhoda as we grew up with Valerie Harper, and we both loved that. And we'd both been watching White Horses, the theme tune for which came out as a single and was in the chart. So I owned this single. And Darryl said, well, yeah, me too. And I said, but I used to put this record on and I used to dance round and round and round and gallop round the living room.
I was going to say gallop,
over and over and over again. I just keep putting it on. And he just said, yeah, me too. Which just encapsulated.
I bore witness to a lot of Me Too moments between you and Darryl.
But not in that.
No, not hashtag Me Too, but just Me Too moments.
Just a nice way.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I will miss him greatly.
Yeah, what a lovely guy.
We already do. So thank you, Daz.
Thanks, everyone, for that. That's really moving and touching, and I'm really grateful for you all doing that. Let's go back to 22 now, when Darryl interviewed artist Ken White at the XTC convention in Swindon. Here is an edited version of what they said.
What do you call that noise?
Hello again, it's me. As if you haven't seen enough of me, I promise you this is the last time I will take to the stage, tonight or tomorrow. This is it. Already. Yay! Thank you, Evan. First of all, we had planned things slightly different. We were going to show Yvonne's film about Ken immediately before we came on. Didn't quite work that way, but it's fine. You all remember the film. Yvonne, our lovely Yvonne Wooten, made that for us. Spent a lot of time with Ken, researching his life, spent interviewing him, and brilliant. Ken White, the legend, the legendary Ken White, the man who will be known to all of you. Even if you don't know his name, you will have seen his artwork. You will have seen the iconic Black Sea album sleeve. You will have seen the townhouse, which was, emblazoned all over acetate labels and stuff, which I've got in my collection. You would have seen the Scarlet Lady on the back of a Virgin Atlantic. On the front, I'm sorry, you're absolutely right, on the front of a Virgin Atlantic airplane, and in so many other places. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome Ken to the stage for the 2022 convention. Ken White. Right, Ken, why don't we go back to the beginning? Why don't you tell us what was the spark that ignited your interest in art?
I've always liked it since in school, 10 or 11. I did a painting which went into the Agri, which was a big paper from Swindon, and having something like that go into the paper, I thought, I can do something. And I couldn't do anything else. I was at maths or English, and to get recognition at that age was quite nice. I'd always thought it was rubbish to me.
But before you became an artist, you were working locally, weren't you? You were doing other odd jobs, working in kind of in industrial Swindon.
I was working for the Great Western Railways, which is the whole town. Everybody worked there at that age. You didn't get a choice. It was pushed straight into the railways. Probably my granddad, my dad, my brother. It was what you did at that time. Yeah.
We saw in the film that Yvonne made that you listed one of your major influences as Rennie Magritte. But what about other people? You kind of come from that pop art background of people like Peter Blake, or who's the guy that did Tommy? I wrote it down. Mike McInerney. Are these names that kind of influenced you at all?
Not really, no.
That's fine. That's great.
I like Big Break, although I wasn't honest to tell he was a great, but then was pop art, you should say, so, did that pop art, painting them. Yeah, wasn't.
So when did you start from then? You're at art school. When were you at art school? What's the year we're talking about?
60s.
So during the 60s, there's a big gap then, obviously, before you start working for Virgin. So what was going on?
I was sitting with Rick Davis.
Oh, Rick Davis from Supertramp.
Yeah, and Gil House, we moved to London together and got a flat in Ladbroke Grove, which is awful. Smell of cabbage. My seat.
Rick Davis smell of cabbage or the house?
No, rats used to be there and mice coming through the cupboard eating the food. That was pretty awful. Then Ray and me agreed to take to another flat together. Rick went off, circulated bit. In Supertramp. I think he had a group full and then he once or something. And then he got hit to the Supertramp. And then he started getting to do Mr. Moody's Garden. I did backing vocals on that.
You did backing vocals on
Mr. Moody's Garden.
Yeah?
Yeah. I thought the same, really.
I wouldn't be so rude. I would.
Yeah, do that tip on Denmark Street. Yeah, so he got big and I was by myself in the flat. And I was still doing graphic designs and painting like that. Working with the British Council. Yeah, then got married. Then we moved out. Then down to... I moved out to Swindon, and that's when I did the Gold Mine Bridge.
So when did you start working with Richard Branson? When did you meet Richard Branson and start working for Virgin?
Well, I did that mural in 1976. And you went all the kind of colour supplements all over one weekend. So I became the mural, so the weekend with Richard Branson saw it. And that's when I did the townhouse. But first in 1978.
Yeah. Do people know what the townhouse is?
It's recorded.
A few people not doing it. As Ken said, a very famous recording studio in London.
Yeah, I think XTC recorded there as well.
Yeah, they certainly did masters there. I don't think they recorded there. Their albums were mastered there.
Yeah, Peter Gregory knows the people. Television. Well, Hugh Patcham was there. He helped me paint the railings on town.
Hugh Patcham helped you paint the railings?
Yeah. And Nick Glosser was there. And Nick Glosser, he was there as well.
And Nick Glosser?
He did help me paint railings. And there's a guy called George, can't remember his own name. And I used to stay there, because upstairs are bedrooms and all that. Right. So that's when I used to come down and see all these other guys in the Greece and stuff. Like Freddie Mercury, they come. Not the big groups, the Brenton and Sting as long as we did.
It must have been an incredibly exciting time, but then you come back to Swindon and you start painting murals. How did the mural painting come around in Swindon?
I did them before the townhouse. That's when I did Gold Mine Bridge, and I did Bay Severance in it.
Yeah.
Which have all gone now, of course.
Are they all gone? All
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I painted that Gold Mine Bridge about twice and 3 times. Yeah. That's why it's still there, and it was lasted well.
So your Swindon personalities, we'll all know the Swindon personalities mural, I'm sure. The iconic one with 5 members of XTC in the middle of it, and various members of other groups, and Gilbert O'Sullivan and whatever. Yeah. That was
just inherited.
That was what, 1979 you did that?
No, it's before Townhouse. This was 78.
Okay. So
I served with Richard on 1978, working for him.
I'd like to know, and I don't know the answer, I generally don't know the answer to this. On that mural, you've got Barry's head ripped off and Dave's pasted over it, and then Barry painted on somebody else. One, was Barry's head ever there in the first place, in that space?
Yeah, because he left, didn't he?
So what, you did paint the original 1977, 78 lineup of them, and then painted Dave over it?
Yeah, because Dave came, that's why a couple of heads came.
And who's Barry over the top of? Because next, you painted Barry on again later, obviously, when he was having some
So I
success.
think Barry's on the first one, and then Dave got, he's moved in.
Yeah.
And then, so I moved Barry on, put Dave head on his.
But there was, if I recall correctly, and I might be wrong, but if I recall correctly, when Barry's head's ripped off and there's a poster with Dave's head over the top of it, there's a character to the left of them, which has Barry's head painted on. So obviously at that point, Barry must have either started Street Back or was working with a restaurant for dogs or something like that. And I just wondered who the character was that he was pasted over. Do you not recall?
No.
Don't worry, we'll look at the picture later.
Yeah, it's golden.
If you don't know the picture I'm talking about, Ken will be outside later, outside in the bar, as he has been for a couple of hours, signing copies of some of his artwork. And he's got some images from these murals, which you're more than welcome to look at. They were too small to bring in and show you here, but you'll see the Swindon Personalities mural with them in. So I thought you were raising your arms if you had a tattoo of it or something. Like your shoulder. Do you think that the mural and having them on there was in any way an influence to you getting the commission to do the background for Black Sea? Was it connected at all?
No, I don't think it's Black Sea gone on Commander, isn't it? I'm not sure what date.
Black Sea's 1980, so it's a couple of years after,
Yeah. No, new Andy, he said why he wanted. That's why he got a little sketch. He gave me that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when he gave you that sketch, and what we're talking about, if you don't know, this is Ken's original artwork for the Black Sea cover, what became the Black Sea cover, and this in the bottom corner is Andy's little sketch that led to that. Is that correct?
Yeah.
When he gave you this little sketch, did you know it was going to be called Black Sea at that time? Were they still working on this idea? It might be work under pressure, or was it just, here's an idea, can you do it?
I think Andy came into that, he wanted something like that. Out the road, what somebody else wanted. Who's it, Ian Reid?
Ian Reid was their manager at the time.
Yeah, he's been now. He said he got me a Virgin job.
Ian Reid says he got you the Virgin job, even though you've been working for them for years.
No, it was the same sort of type.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he says it was him that got you the job.
Yeah. So he went to the camp or something.
There's a reason Ian Reid isn't very well liked in the XTC circles, or Ian Greed, as he's quite often referred to.
He's on the course, isn't he?
Yeah, initially, yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
So he said the backdrop was the image was based on a rough sketch from Andy. And if you look at the cover, obviously it's not that image. It's a copy of that image which has been blown up or repainted. Or how did that come about? What happened?
Well, I have just black and white originally.
Yeah.
To London to be blown up.
Right.
And I painted it in the temple on the floor.
So again, if you go and visit Ken in the bar, look how that sounds awful, it sounds like you're a drunkard. Go and visit Ken in the bar, you can see the original black and white image, which was, as you said, later blown up, and then you hand painted or hand tinted the whole backdrop.
Yeah. It ended up like that.
And ended up something not dissimilar to that, but we'll all know the iconic one on the front sleeve rather of the album.
You never see all that. Of course, they're standing in front of it. They're divers.
So it was Andy's idea from the start to have the hidden X, T, and C.
Yeah.
But you changed it, didn't you? You decided.
Yeah, I put seagull on there instead of a cross mount. The ships which Andy did. Yeah.
So this seagull here. We were talking about this slightly earlier, and yes, and if you don't know, you have the X, which is the seagull, the T, which is the mast, and the C, which is the crescent moon. And several years later, Andy clearly liked this idea, because several years later he revisited the same thing for Mummer. And if you know the original inside sleeve of Mummer, which is now the outside sleeve for the remastered version of it, you can see Andy in a mother's uniform holding a sword. You can see, I think it's Colin holding a crook for a shepherd's crook. And I think I'm correct in writing, in remembering, there's an X on Andy's hat, which is the X. There's the sword, which is the T, and the shepherd's crook is the C. And Andrew Swainson, who does his art now, or works with Andy on their artwork, has used that same XTC on the label of the record. Okay. So it's obviously an idea that's carried over several years. Yeah. But that's your seagull. That's not his. That's your seagull. Yeah. That seagull screaming is yours. Got the idea.
That's why it's in a green bag. The XTC on it. Because they said nobody can read that. Yeah.
So because they couldn't work out who it was by, and it didn't have a name on it or anything.
No.
It wasn't like a Beatles album, which didn't necessarily have to have the name on the band anymore.
No.
They couldn't get away with it. That's why the green bag was issued. Again, if the original issue of Black Sea in Britain and in several other countries came in a green paper bag, and I know in some other countries it's issued in a black plastic carrier bag with XTC Black Sea in silver.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, so that's why, because nobody could work out what the hell it was.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you recall this because it's such a long time ago now, but was Andy very clear about how he saw the image of the band or the image he wanted to portray for that record? Did he know what he wanted to say when he explained it to you?
People drawing it, yeah. I mean, he did all the art cover. Because, you went around for the same uncle I went to.
Yeah.
So it's, very good for drawing things out. Shoot the idea is all you want.
So what's that? It looks like about the size of a post-it note. Was it just a little scrap of paper?
Crap, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you put it on, yeah. I did the townhouse in 1970. I did a broken window.
You did? Oh, the broken window at the townhouse?
Yeah, because I got bored painting all the windows all around, and there's so many of them.
Ken's about, if you've not seen the image, Ken's, and again, you can show people if they come and see you afterwards, can't they? You've got a picture of it. The mural of the townhouse features a broken window, and it's actually bricked up behind the window, isn't it? So there's bricks inside there as well.
Yeah, I like private trip. I worked in British. I went all over Europe doing painting mecca stores before, and I went into America as well for murals in
Right.
Yeah.
Full Virgin.
Yeah. So I got that Orange County in there as well. And I got this in my book.
There is also a book.
I've done about 100 murals.
100 murals. Yeah. Seven or eight in Swindon and 100 around the world.
Yeah, Europe. I've been at every city in Europe.
Really?
Yeah.
And how many of those are still left? How many are still
I
standing?
don't know. Because they do show, measure stores, they've ran out, didn't they? Didn't do many more after a while.
So we talked about the majority of the ones that you did were in stores and done for displays in them rather than street art.
Yeah.
We'd think of it as street art still, I guess.
Yeah, usually in the record section.
Right.
I did big guitars on the walls and Marilyn Monroe and all of it. One-man figures. Los Angeles, I was in the garage working. And I had a projector. It's a big draw Marilyn Monroe. It's never quite run. It's on somebody that wronged the mayor for some. So he's projected my all the way up. The guy sent me in the next morning. I said, "Come, you were fast." And I said, "What? I do it all the time." Yeah, it's quite nice working on it. Well, 6 weeks I was there by myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really lonely job I had. Stuck in the hotel, watch TV, back to work, work again. This sounds a good job, but it's not. You're by yourself some of the time.
What was Branson like as an employer? Was he good? Was he easy to get on with?
Yeah, I used to stay at his house as well.
Yeah.
Give him tea when he's in the bar. Yeah. It was very close in the early days, the Virgin. You all know each other.
Yeah. So when did that come to an end? What was there a parting of the ways for a reason, or was it just kind of there was no more work coming in?
Yeah.
What was happening?
Yeah, because it got bigger.
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys who've worked on the departments on the airline or the visa side, and they left. And it's good, you've seen every city you go up. So they'll be together for a whole day. Seen it. That's quite good that way.
Since you've been back here and since kind of leaving Virgin, I guess, certainly as far as I'm aware, much more recently. You've been working on canvases and a lot of kind of industrial kind of influence canvases, going right back to maybe your days as a hot riveter and stuff. Why? How have things kind of turned full circle for you? How does that come about?
Well, first, they're in my head, when you paint things, it's easy.
Sure.
And more people just imagine pen landscapes or amazing go.
I think that's true of most artists, isn't it? You can't. The best art you can do is if you do what you know. If you're writing or if you're making music, to write about what you know, paint what you know. I was going to point out at this point that there are several Ken's paintings on display at Steam. But we're not at Steam, so it's kind of pointless. I can't really direct you down the corridor and say, down there, and turn left, and there you'll see one of Ken's amazing row paintings. But you're also in the art gallery, or the museum rather locally.
Yeah, closed now, the council there.
Oh, that's closed now?
Yeah.
I'm so glad I got to see stuff there before it closed.
Yeah, but they're in the city offices, I think that's the gallery there.
Just ludicrous.
Yeah, it comes everything. All the nice buildings are gone.
Yeah. Well, we heard Andy talking about, all the nice buildings are kind of falling apart or disappeared. How do you see you now as a, with the greatest respect, and an aged gentleman getting on still? 79, I think you are, aren't you currently? 79, getting very close towards his 80th. Are you still, you're still creating today? You're still you're still managing at home and getting by and doing stuff?
Yeah, not playing golf. I feel my age usually. Yeah, still paint.
Do you paint every day?
Well, I start. I'm doing one. I don't sort of keep on.
Yeah.
I have to go back and you see it different. When you go back,
Sure.
Things where you need miniatures done or see.
Does that work for you? I mean, as someone who writes, I often will write something and I'll it's not working, so I'll walk away from it.
Yeah.
And I'll come back maybe a day, 2 days, maybe a week, a month later, and look at it with kind of fresh eyes. Is that what you do as an artist?
Yeah.
Do you find yourself, thinking, God, I hate this. It doesn't work at all. This is rubbish, and starting all over again, or do you just
never do that? Just so I work at things, I'll go back and see it, and you see it in fresh eyes again. We think, I'm not there. They're all up in there,
Does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask Ken at all? Don't feel obliged, but you can do if you wish. If you don't wish, you can go buy one of his posters instead and get
it. My book is even better.
Or his book. You're not selling the book, are you? You can buy your book on Amazon.
Yeah, that's the only way. You can.
Yeah.
You have to buy it on Amazon,
But you can do that too.
I've got a question.
Steve.
All your murals you did in Swindon, were you ever asked whether that they were to be preserved, or was it a council decision, or was it a owners of the house decision?
Well, there's owners of the house, a lot of people say it was down to, but same as on famous faces, they said it was down to, in front of it was a wall about that high, with a gap there.
Yeah.
So it rained and went straight down and never went anywhere, it just stayed there, so that's where that come from. When some bloke around the house had his card, but that's where it came from.
Right.
So that's when they stripped it all off. I wish they got there and they take bits off. You could have kept a piece of it. I got some small bits, but they don't tell you anything.
Well, you kept small bits of wall.
Yeah, picture. If you got some of the places, XTC pads for them.
I'm sure there are quite a few people here who wouldn't want the bricks with, Andy or Collins or faces on or whatever. Yeah. Okay, any more questions from anybody at all? And yes, sir.
Did you do the mural on Cambria Bridge?
Yeah.
Is that still there?
No, it's been painted over it.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, but it's a good job. It's two spray gun artists. They've got me on it as well.
They've actually included you in their painting?
Yeah.
Good.
They got people like Billy Piper, so they kept all the Swindon snares on there. Yeah, so it's good. Because I always do history of Swindon.
Right, everybody, I think if there are no more questions from me. Oh, no, please.
I was thinking, the Goldwynch mural that's still there, you said you painted it several times.
Yeah.
So is that a private house? When they decide, this needs to be clearing up, have they contacted you personally, or have they gone through someone else?
No, the council, of course. Council. Yeah, because I did it for the council originally.
Oh, okay.
I painted it in 1976. Yeah, so it's still there. I think I got the dates on the bottom somewhere. So you can still go and see it if you want. So I mean, it's still there. It's just Bush started me. That's the first thing I did. which led to all the reparations done, really. Yeah. That was repaired in 20 years. A long span.
Yeah, longer than XTC Virgin.
Yeah.
I think. Working out my head now, actually. Right, it might not be.
I think that was not the noise martial. I don't know why I think that.
No.
Something went wrong.
Something went wrong. Let's leave it at that. Something definitely went wrong. Yeah. No, it would have been longer, wouldn't it? 70 kind of 7 through 2000. When was the last album? 92, isn't it? Non-such. So no, it is less than 20 years.
Yeah.
It was less than 20 years. Anyway, listen. Please give it up for the amazing, the wonderful, the talented, the venerated, venerable Mr. Kev White. We'll take another short break now, so please Neville do, we'll get yourself a drink.
I feel like we should print out a picture of Darryl and put it in like a Swindon pub or something. He's got notoriety. There should be a selfie of Darryl just plastered everywhere in Swindon. Can you imagine how much he would laugh at that?
Absolute walrus of love.
What do you call that noise?
Thank you to the many people who contributed to this episode. Thanks to Dan Barrow for the music, and thank you to the many wonderful podcast supporters on Patreon who include the following Knights in Shining Karma: Terry Arnett, Kevin Burt, Lorenzo Ciacci, Cale Corbett, Liam Duggan, Jamie Dunn, Alison Eels, Jeff Farris, Mike Grafe, Robert Graham, Camille Henry, Stephen Hope, Alan Hughes, Marek Kraus, Jesper Kumberg, Robert Lawlaw, Adrian Loon, Liz Lynch, Murray Meikle, Sarah Miralski, Yusef Murrah, Max Nyaho, Amy Parkinson, Tim Parsons, Mark Reed, James Reimer, Jaime Rastamora, Michael Sutcliffe, Steve Swift, Mark Thomas, Nigel Waller, John Wademeyer, Lucy Verbitsky, and Martin Whitley. That's all for now. See you next time.